Today on the Therapy Dogs Australia podcast, Sam and I will be chatting with the lovely Marleen Boom about her experience initially failing a temperament test with her future therapy dog. Marleen details the assessment experience and what she and her dog still needed to work through in order to successfully pass the assessment a few months later. We hope this episode will reassure those who feel anxious about their upcoming assessment and shine some light on why it's a necessary part of the therapy dog training journey. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Hello. Welcome to another episode with Therapy Dogs Australia, the podcast. Today, Sam and I are going to be chatting to Marleen, which is very exciting because we're going to discuss the temperament test and everything to do with that. And when you fail it the first time, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the be all and end all, because Marleen's been through that process and passed on the second attempt. So we're going to go through a little bit of that today. How are you, Marleen?
I'm good, thank you.
That's good. To kick us off, do you want to give us and the listeners a little bit of a background about yourself?
Yeah, I'm an occupational therapist, and I went to a webinar about therapy dogs, and that's kind of how I started. I have a field spaniel who's 5 years old named Kuma. So she was my first therapy dog. So she's going into 2 or 3 years now that she's working with me. And then I have a 2-year-old Labrador named Miku, who is unfortunately failed her first temperament test, but has started working now as well. So yeah.
Lovely. How old's Mika?
Miku's 2.
2, yeah. And she's just started working with you. Yeah. Oh, lovely. And how did you hear about us? How did you get in touch with us?
Through the webinar that I did, there were some suggestions, and I kind of just through Google as well. It's a very good tool. And just checked out the courses, and for me, it was really important that I did a course as well that had some sort of certifications because my insurance requires that. So that is always really good as well to have a course that assesses you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And how long have you been an OT for?
A few years, 4 or 5 years now. Yeah.
And you kind of knew that you wanted to bring animal assisted therapy in quite early on, or it was the webinar that kicked it all off?
But yeah, once I discovered that I could work with my dogs, I'm like, oh my God, this is something that I really want to explore. And, I know that some of the research still needs to come out, but there's such good research about using dogs in therapy as well. And, achieving client goals. And at the end of the day, that's why I became an OT, to help clients. And look, it's a bonus that I can do that with my dogs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose we should also probably cover what the temperament test is, because I realized that I did mention that in the beginning, but I'm not sure everyone listening will understand what we're talking about. But when you go through the Therapy Dogs Australia course, at the end, you'll be doing a practical assessment, written assessments, and then also you need to get temperament assessed, get your dog temperament assessed with us or with a locum trainer.
Yeah, it can be a little bit extensive because we're making sure that we've had a look at the learning outcomes for the handler and the dog. So to be able to do both, like we do assess people throughout the course as well. So we have lots of worksheets and things like that, and we keep an eye on people's comprehension of the ideas and things like that, so that we can address gaps in learning along the way. But we've got a final reflection task that is a few pages long, and people fill that in with their final assessments as well. So that gives us, another opportunity to just make sure that people have received the information in the courses, rather than sort of passively attended. So we've got that, and then we've got the obedience assessment. I can't remember I don't think we've talked about very much about that. Basically, that's our sits and drops and walking on the lead and things like that. So that's all submitted by video, And we mark that, us Therapy Dogs Australia and our trainers, we mark that via video. And the reason that we do that is because even though we have lots of locum trainers all over the place and they're amazing, every dog trainer is going to have a different way of doing things and looking at things. So we teach you those obedience skills and manners skills. So that's why we assess them. We don't teach them to you and then send you to someone else who might not understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then the final thing is the temperament assessment. So the temperament assessment, the reason that can be done by locum trainers all over Australia, as long as they're formally accredited trainers and they are appropriately insured and willing to work with us, we can send you to a locum trainer to do the temperament assessment, because temperament is quite stable across all dog trainers. So we've definitely found from certainly the trainers that we're already using that, like trainers that have got a formal accreditation have been trained in assessing a dog's temperament. So that's what has given us a lot of flexibility to be able to run these courses nationally, is that because Marleen, you're in Western Australia.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, we're in Queensland. So in the old days, Marleen would have had to drive across the Nullarbor and then have to do that every 12 months as well, because therapy dog best practice is that you're trained and assessed every 12 months. So that's incredibly prohibitive if people aren't able to address that. That's a long way to go, and especially with multiple dogs too.
Oh yeah, it adds up.
Even if you wanted to fly your dogs, which is, it's got its own risks, but even if you wanted to fly your dogs, what are you flying dogs across the country every 12 months? Like, no. So, that's how we do that. But so Marleen, you passed your obedience with Miku. Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah. And then went and did the temperament assessment with your locum dog trainer, who came back to us and had a few bits and pieces of feedback that we then discussed with them. And we came back to you and said, we just don't think that Miku is ready yet. And then do you want to tell us a little bit about that? What was going on there?
Yeah, and upon reflection, probably not the best environment for her to do. So it was a really hot day. So instead of meeting out, we met at a doggy daycare, so that it was a bit cooler. But doggy daycares are full of stress and stress as well. And it was a little bit darker, and you could just see that Miku wasn't 100% comfortable, but we went ahead anyway. So when a stranger tried to pat her, she barked at them, and then she had a bark at another person, but she did let one person pat her, and you could just see she wasn't 100% happy. The last person she did bark at, he got her to sit and he did a high five, and that seemed to engage her a little bit better. So didn't really set her up for success really as well. I felt a little bit as a handler as well, for sure. Then so what I then worked on was that she needs to be comfortable with strangers sometimes invading her space, and because Miku is a bit more like her own space rather versus my other dog, and that's probably why I didn't really do train her as much with people invading her space, because my other dog is very, very good. So I just did some training, and I've actually put a bit of a cue on her going up to strangers as well, so she knows that I want her to go up and the strangers are going to pat her. So it's as simple as saying, oh, say hello, and that means go up to that person and expect a pat from them. And that was really, really so that's what we worked on. I just asked strangers in the street, can you please pat my dog? You get some really weird looks, really. I'm like, oh, most people want to pat dogs. But, so, and it's, but that's, it set Miku up for more of a success when I redid my temperament test, because as we were going up to strangers, I can go and say hello, and then she would go up to them, get patted, and then she would be able to leave, or she comes back to me and I go, go and say hello, and she'll go back. So yeah, so that was, well, that's how I kind of did it. So, but it was really
do assessments.
I think 2 or 3 months.
Okay. Yeah.
It was shorter than what I thought it was going to be. But I did say back to your trainer, I was like, this is a really good team. So I think they'll get it sorted. So yeah, which is cool. Which is great, because so it sounds like you worked on improving her confidence by letting her know what to expect. So like, instead of feeling a bit apprehensive and a bit uneasy, like, is this person coming up to me? Why are they doing that? Really helping her understand, like, you go up to them and they pat you and it's great. Does she seem more confident overall?
Yeah, and if she's not 100% sure, I tell them to give her a bit of a bum scratch. That's her favorite.
Yeah.
So
that'll really win her over.
yeah, and like, because I do agility with her, I do lots of different sports, and she's never done that in those environments either. But she's always been, since she was a 13-week-old puppy, she came along to those things, and she kind of knows that environment and that sort of thing. So I think it's raising her confidence and her confidence around other people in different environments as well.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and it sounds like, helping her understand as well, like, there's something in the interaction for her too. So if they're going to give her a bum scratch, we're like, great, like, I love bum scratches. This is great. New people can give you bum scratches. I absolutely have a reason to approach you now. This is fantastic. Yeah. So I really like that you've paired those things up, because we're trying to tap into that dog's natural, okay, so how can this be beneficial for you, so that they naturally want to be going up to people and really breaking down that kind of apprehensive, like, oh, I don't know, like,
and the high five works really well with her as well. So both my dogs are taught high five. Kuman, it doesn't matter as much, but Miku does, because kids often want to hug dogs, and Kuma you can hug to the end of days. Miku becomes a bit more apprehensive. So I'll get kids to do high five with her, and she loves doing high five. She'll do that until the cows come home. So she's a funny little dog every now and again. So
it's actually great discussing this also, because we've mentioned before how we try and steer clear of treats and use other reinforcers in a therapy dog setting, for that very reason, that you managed to pair not only butt scratches, but it was something that can be easily reinforced with the people that she engages with.
Yeah, and that's what I looked for, because I don't constantly want to have to reward her with food. Initially, when I got her to say hello to people, I definitely had food on me. But once they do the bum scratches, she doesn't really care about food, and she really likes toys as well. So if someone plays with her, well, they're her best friend. But that's not always doable either. But she's quite easy to please once I figured out how to make sure that she felt comfortable with those type of people.
Yeah, I think that's great. And like, I think it's really cool to put some structure to that and help her understand, like, everything's cool, man. Like, you've done this before. Like, I know it's a new and different person, but it's not a new and different situation, because with my Brumbies, when I'm teaching them their husbandry stuff, I always say, ready, right before I do something that's going to be like the next level up of invasive stuff. And even though it's like, you could think like that could backfire and be like, oh, I'm going to say ready and they're going to run off. But because I grade the exposure, it's like, I'm not saying ready and then just flooding you with the next horrible thing. I'm saying ready and then grading the exposure up a little bit to something that you can handle. But I find it works really well. I think yeah, I do it with my dogs when I'm clipping their nails as well. I'll say ready and then clip and then ready and then clip. It's like they know it's coming. I don't like trick them into it, you know, just like, okay, get ready, it's happening. They're like, it just seems to make it easier for them. So it's kind of that say hello for her kind of made it like, this is the thing that you're going to do. Like, and it's all cool. And if you were using food the whole time, you probably would have found that she would have gone up to people, quickly got the pat, and then rushed back to you for the food, which is what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. She does circle back to me every now and again, but that's like, okay, I think it's her way of saying that she's done with that interaction. But if I ask her to re-engage, she does. So it's she's not leaving because she's going to get something from me. I think it's just her way of going,
which is totally fine. Totally fine and normal. Absolutely. Especially out and about. Like, it's really normal for the dogs to be like, okay, what's next, Mum?
Yeah, and like if I'm walking her, you know, she's got a job to do. She's walking with me. She's not, she'll have a sniff every now and again, but she's not, she wants to continue to walk and work. So
Did you find also, Marleen, that when you failed your first temperament assessment, that you, because of the course, you kind of knew why, you didn't feel too like disheartened about the whole thing as well? Because it sounds like you were really aware even before the assessment started that it probably wasn't the best environment. Like, did that then help you feel like, not so disheartened about the whole thing?
Yeah, I think more the environment was more with reflection. I'm like, that, like, she's never been there, but well, she did agility training there, but there were no other dogs barking and like carrying on. And but I knew that when I failed the assessment, I knew why, and I would probably have failed me as well. And it's not just her that failed, it was me as well, and I think we failed as a team because I didn't set her up. And you know, but I knew she was better than barking at someone. So, and she ended up doing lovely work in her second temperament test. So yeah.
No, it just sounds like, having had like gone through the course, it meant that it wasn't such a personal thing. And I think maybe some people, when they hear that we're going to be assessing them at the end of the course, it can be quite daunting. But hopefully when you've gone through the course, you kind of are really right there with us and understanding like why decisions are made and like what you can do to.
And I think the feedback Sam gave as well is like, you know, this is our expectation and you didn't quite meet it. Well, fair enough. You've got to, you have to have a level of standard, because otherwise, like, why have the course? So I think that's fair enough. And like, you know, I get feedback about Kuma's obedience and her recall, because it's definitely that's not our strong suit. And definitely when she's got a pretty good recall when there's food involved, but when it's just for pets, it becomes a little bit more apprehensive. And even though you know, I think once you are past, it's kind of up to you to assess as well. Do I want to put my dog in that situation, or do I, like Miku, would I go into a big shed and do a therapy session there? Probably not, because it wasn't that successful the first time. So, and I never work Kuma off lead. She has got an off lead recall, but I stress about it, so I don't put ourselves in that situation. So I think that's, even after the course gives you the skills to continue to reflect upon what you've got and what your dogs are doing, and making sure that you're setting them up for success, and also that they have a great client engagement as well.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, so cool to be able to talk about this, because we do have people fail their temperament assessments, people fail their obedience assessments, and it can be really hard for people to know that, you know, our purpose behind marking you as not yet competent is to really set you up for success. It's not to break you down. It's not because we think you're an idiot. It's not because we think your dog's shit. Like, it's not those things. It'll be that we can see that this isn't quite ready yet. And it can be really hard to look at yourself in a non-bias. Like, you had pretty good insight about your situation. But for people to look at themselves and their dogs, I mean, you love them, like, you know, and you're excited and you want to get out there and do stuff. Or people sometimes their reassessments is where it falls apart. It's like you mentioned, Marleen, like people sometimes don't keep up with their dogs during the year, and then they reassess and we go, oh, no, this has fallen apart. Or they move down levels as well at their reassessments. And, you know, like sometimes that's not for lack of effort. Sometimes there's something that's gone on in the dog's life or the handler's life and whatever, and it just will be what will be. But the purpose of marking people as not yet competent is to help keep them safe and to help keep their dogs safe. And as dog trainers, there's only so much that we can do. And you've got to remember that that dog trainer is putting their name on the line. Like, they need to be sure. So it has to go past your locum dog trainer. So they need to give me the feedback. They fill in those forms and they give that to me. And then I make the final decision as well. So sometimes a locum will be saying, oh, yeah, I think they're okay. But I will look at that with the other information that I've got about the team, including their obedience assessment and their written work. And I'll make the final decision about whether or not it's going to be okay. Because if it's a handler that we need to give a bit more support to, or the obedience is really right on the edge as well, then I'll be saying, do you know what? Even though you're a great person and you've made so much progress with your dog and it's looking like pretty good, you're not ready to look after the well-being of a human client with just you and that dog just yet. And if you do take yourself into a situation where that was to take place, I do worry that it could fall apart. And we put the locum dog trainer's name and our name on this team. And if something goes wrong, it's not going to be just you that gets a phone call. It's going to, like, from whoever has been implicated by whatever's happened with you and the dog. It's not going to be just you. I dare say it'll be us as well that gets a phone call, and it'll be, it'll escalate.
Absolutely. Like, you know, and that's why there's expectations.
Yeah. The one of the things too, so people might be listening going, oh, well, why'd you do the assessment if the dog was already like not sure in that environment and things like that? And I just want to address that for people. When you've booked in something, you've booked it in, you are paying for it, regardless of whether you decide to do it. Like, if you've booked someone's time, I dare say you'll be paying for it, regardless of whether you do your assessment or not. You've taken time off work, you've prepped your dog, you know, you've done all these things, you're all excited. And then somehow, somewhere, because this does happen a bit, where people go to wherever they're doing their temperament assessments, and for whatever reason, the dog just isn't right and the handler's just not right. And we call them bombing it. They just completely bomb their assessment. And it's out of character for them, and it's this whole thing and all this stuff. But do you know what? It's just one of those things that happens. It's the luck of the draw. You know, it just happened to be hot that day. Tried to problem solve it by going indoors. It backfired. Shit happens. You know, it's just
it's not really
things.
any different than doing any other exam. And, you know, you wake up sick that day, but
that's it.
You got to do it.
Yeah, the pressure's on, and you know, the trainer has to try and set up some kind of environment that's going to test the dog. We can't just, you know, meet everybody down at the park and throw the ball 3 times and go, what a lovely dog. Like, we've got to have some pressures in the situation, because that's what's going to be happening in their working life. Is there's going to be pressures on the dog and there's going to be pressures on the handler. So if this happens to you guys, if something happens and you rock up and you're like, oh my God, like this is just immediately fallen apart, try and reframe it for yourself to be an opportunity to practice. Call it a practice exam for yourself. When I did the national psychology exam, so 3-hour exam, you have to pass to finish your internship. And it is a nightmare of an exam. I think there's 150 questions. It's 3 hours and you have to get 70% to pass. And it's all domains of psychology.
Pressure.
They were scheduling the exam every 3 months. So you can't do it. You can't just go and resit it. And back then it was $450 per sitting to sit in. And to try and study for that bad boy is a dead set nightmare. Like, you're already working full time because you're an intern. And like at the time that it was coming about, I told the story to my supervisors 1,000 times. So if they're listening, sorry guys. But as it was coming about, I got the workplace that I was at, got a tender I was doing animal assisted therapy. And I had like, all of a sudden I had no clients for ages. And then I had a massive influx of clients and I had to develop all these treatment plans and, you know, and I was running groups and individual clients. And like, it was just, I was full, like flat tack all day, every day, all of a sudden out of nowhere, when I'd been like a much reduced workload to that. And it was in the lead up to my exam. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to, like, I'd made this big spreadsheet. It's like all domains, like there's books and books and books on the reading list. Like, it's ridiculous, the amount of content. So I was like, I'm not going to be able to study like with my fancy spreadsheet that I made. I'm not going to have time. Should I cancel the exam? Or I don't exam well, all through uni and everything. Like, I'd go into an exam and be like, all right, I'm prepared. I'd study heaps. I'm prepared. Sit the exam and be like, all right, I think that went well. And then get my results back and be like, oh.
Oh, that's devastating though.
Like, I'd be sitting on 7s. My assignments were always good because I had better processing time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I'd be sitting on like these high grades and then go in and get like very average grades at the end of the course and be like damn it.
Damn.
Hate exams. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to do a practice exam because I also don't like going into the city. So, and I was going to have to drive. It's in this lab thing in the city and blah, blah, blah. And I get scared driving to the city because everything's one-way streets and it's tight and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so I was like, all right, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to spend this money, $450, spend this money, and I'm just going to go and do this as a practice exam because I need to practice anyway. And, you know, even though I've done the other practice exams that are online, I actually need to practice driving into the city, finding the building, going up to the computer lab, asking the people where I'm supposed to be, and be in the exam room for 3 hours. And, you know, like those things around it are the things that are challenging for me. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to say goodbye to this money and goodbye to this street. I'll just, you know, book the next one that's in 3 months' time and try and get study for that, you know. And went and did it anyway. It turned out the other computer lab was full. I don't know who's in, like, it's like an exam running place. It's like high rise in the city. And the other lab was full. So I was in this other computer lab by myself, and they had, so it's like full of, like, there's like 30 computers spots in there, but it's like got this all windowed wall. So I could see the whole city, spinny chairs and bowls of lollies.
Wow.
At every computer desk.
Wow.
So, I was the only one in there. So the whole exam, I was like, because I'd like focus and then be like movement break and be spinning around on my chair and walking around the room, looking out the window at like what's going on out there. Like, oh, look at that crane. They're building something. Take all my favorite lollies out of the lolly jars at every desk. go back to my desk, do another like 20 questions, have another break, spinning on the chair. Like they must have been watching me because they obviously observed. They must have been watching me like, I wonder what the go is here. I was so lucky that was like the case. I reckon if the room was full and I couldn't, because if there's other people in the room, you can't spin around on the chair.
It's also hot and
yeah.
And
people noises because it's quiet. So people making noises would have been a big thing for me. Like
eating, people eating lollies or wrappers.
Like, I would have been so like just way over threshold with like in that environment. I was just lucky. I passed the exam. So I didn't have to study at all and then ended up passing this exam on the first go. So, which is because I could spin around on the chairs. So it was
probably a little bit more than that.
Well, you know,
not
the
just
information was probably in there, but it's getting the information out. Like how do we get the information out? Like obviously when I was examining at uni, that those conditions were not conducive to getting the information out. Like
you weren't relaxed.
That doesn't work for me, obviously. I've learned. I spent 4 years learning that. So I understand very, very well that being assessed and having assessment conditions is stressful. I do understand that. Trust me. Like I get it. What I also want people to know though, is that being an animal assisted therapist in charge of one or more dogs and a client at the same time is also very stressful at times. It's stressful for the dog and it's stressful for the handler sometimes, depending on the client, the dog, what's going on in the situation and your level of experience in animal assisted therapies. It can be stressful. Sometimes things go pear-shaped and it's all a little bit hectic for a few minutes or an hour. It can be, you know, like, oh my goodness, stuff is happening. So we do understand that stress. We can't completely remove stress from the assessment. It's not possible. It can't be done. But also it wouldn't be relevant because we can't remove stress from your job or your life. We actually just physically cannot do that. So I think it's a balancing act of, you know, us being really aware that it's stressful and us being aware that like dogs and handlers bomb assessments sometimes. That's just life. It doesn't mean that they're not good handlers and it doesn't mean that they're not good dogs. They just bomb sometimes. And that's a part of assessment and things like that. However, what we need to do from then is build you up and help you understand, like, so what we need to do now is, hello, Miku. She's like, yeah, sometimes you just bomb the assessments and it's not your fault. You just got a little bit nervous.
Miku's just popped her head into the screen for those listening to the podcast.
Like, hello, Mama. Yes. That when we do these assessments, you know, we want to build people up, but also build your capacity to handle stress and to build your capacity to support your dog in a stressful situation, because there will be stressful situations when you're working with your animals. That's going to happen. I can't stop that from happening. That's just life. If you don't have the capacity to handle stress and handle a dog at the same time and guide them through that, then not yet competent, because that is dangerous and it's going to be horrible for you and it's going to be horrible for the dog. So I really just want people to know that we will give you individualized advice. That wasn't the case for Miku, I didn't think, Marleen. I didn't think it was that you guys panicked or anything. I think it was just the novel situation, unexpected, probably a bit of pressure, and then going like, oh, okay, whoopsie.
Yeah, and you know, and I think that's really important as any therapist as well, or if you've done a course, to reflect upon what's happened. And you know, that's why I say I should have picked up on her stress signs better. But you know, I'm human, she's only a dog, and we've learned from it. So and I think that's, no matter what happens, even if you pass an assessment, you can always go, that wasn't quite right, we need to improve that. Or You know, that's so important, that reflection, that critical reflection, because otherwise you never, you need to keep improving. You can't just stay stagnant. And like you say, it's for the safety of everyone involved. So yeah. And like her going to say hello to people now, that's what I use, and that's successful. So then I won't put her in a situation where she feels like she's so uncomfortable that she needs to bark at my client. And that's not very nice for the client either. They've come there to say hello to a dog or to work with a dog and myself, and the dog's going to bark at them. Well, that's not a great situation for them.
Not on. Yeah, that's right. So lots of things to learn from your experience. So thanks so much for talking to us about it, because I do want to put people's minds at ease a bit, and encourage people as well that, you know, it's not the bit, we do have to mark people as not competent. And we know Marleen, like we've trained Kuma with Marleen. We know Marleen. So when the feedback came back from the trainer, I was surprised, because I know how good Kuma is. So I was like, oh, I'm sure they'll be fine. Like we'll just, you know, have a chat about it and come up with a plan. But if you don't already know us and, you know, these kinds of things are happening, I think that would be more intimidating, you know, like to go, oh, well, what's going on? Like, oh, and it doesn't feel nice to fail things. Like we use the words not yet competent, but obviously it's people obviously understand they've failed something. I know that that's not a nice feeling. So maybe how did you handle that? With, you know, did you have any feelings of like disappointment, stuff like that?
Oh, I definitely was disappointed, because, you know, you not yet competent, failing, kind of the same thing. You're like, and like it is the thing. I've paid this money to a trainer. I've spent all this time because I was hoping to start working Miku quite a bit earlier, but she just wasn't her. She's a working line lab, so she's got a lot of energy, and she just wasn't. I wasn't happy with where she was at. I wanted to work her more close to a year old, and she just wasn't. She wasn't ready. And so now I thought she was ready and we could do everything, we could get our obedience, and then that happens and I'm like, oh damn, like you know, it's ended up working, and it's ended up giving me some really valuable feedback that I've gotten away with stuff with Kuma, because Kuma is so social. She's everyone's best friend. She's never met a stranger. While Miku, she's a bit more reserved. She's a bit more, she's a lot more focused on me as well. So I think acknowledging for me as well as a handler with two dogs that they are totally different and that they need to be treated separately, and that I've obviously missed something in my training, is what I got out of it as well. So yes, I was disappointed, but that disappointment only lasted a little bit until I reflected as to why I failed, if that makes sense.
So do you think, because this is your second dog, like how do we support people when they fail? Do you think that some of that was, do you think you were buffered by that disappointment because you already had Kuma, so you already sort of knew a fair bit about the industry, you already had a dog you could work with? Like some people have spent stupid money on dogs and they've gone and done whatever with them, and then they finally get to the training and then they are not competent on their temperament assessment, and they've invested all this, and they've been telling the school that they're at that the dog's going to be there and all this stuff. Like I think there's a lot of pressures that come about because you're in private practice, aren't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, like how do we support people through that? Because I think there's all these other factors as well. Do you think some of those things, like your particular setup, might have buffered you from a total meltdown? and sending me abusive emails.
Potentially, because Kuma was already working, I didn't need Miku to come on board. I wanted Miku to come on board because she has got a different temperament. Kuma just goes to sleep, right? Kuma says hello to the person and then she goes to her bed, and every now and again she'll do some engagement, but she's not and she's great at co-regulating. That's her main thing. If someone comes in who's anxious, Kuma is great because the whole energy in the room drops because she just goes to sleep.
Yeah.
Miku is a bit more higher energy and wants to interact. So I think there was definitely Miku failing. It wasn't the end of the world because Kuma could keep working. And I've told some clients, I am training another dog, but she's not ready yet. And then now that she is past, I'm transferring some of the clients over, but not all. So I think that is a buffer. So how to support people? You don't want to say, oh, this is what's going to happen and count your chickens before they hatch, basically.
Yeah.
Saying.
I agree with that. I just think, I know that people are also like financially very invested too. So yeah, I guess it's maybe a combination of like being emotionally disappointed by it, and then, the financial, sometimes a workplace is paid for people to do the course and things like that. So I guess like I get it, like where people come from, because sometimes people get very upset with me if they don't pass first time.
Yeah, I'm sure that sometimes it seems personal when it's definitely not.
Yeah, I think, and it's, or they'll, like Marleen didn't even come back and say, I didn't even know that it was that environmental situation, blah, 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 because some people will come straight back to me and say, it's not my fault because of XYZ situation. And I'll say, that's fine, but we need to do the assessment again, because all that we can assess is what has presented on the day. So, but I think people get a little bit overwhelmed with that sort of stuff, but some people can get a bit overwhelmed, which I get it. People are very invested.
But I think people also need to I reflected and go, yeah, that wasn't her normal self, and that was due to the environment. Well, I've put it down to the environment as well. I don't blame you for not, I looked at looking back, or when I got home from the assessment, I was like, yeah, that really wasn't good. I don't know if we'll pass this. And so, I kind of, it wasn't a complete surprise, to be honest, that we didn't pass. So, and I don't know if that's, that reflection, I think, is always really important, and asking people to reflect as to why do you think this has happened? Because it's like, for me, it wasn't totally blue. I think most people would know if it's totally out of the blue as well. So,
I suppose because your dog barked at people, which is a pretty black and white, like that's not very friendly kind of behavior. But some people's dogs haven't barked at people. They've just been, generally apprehensive and timid, and, not such black and white behaviors. And it's probably more difficult for them to then, be unbiased, because they maybe aren't seeing to the level that what the dog trainer is seeing of what the dog's displaying. So sometimes we'll do things like change. We had one dog recently that failed, and the owner was not super impressed. And I think I'd missed an email somewhere. I'm trying to remember. But anyway, they were not impressed. So we just had to explain that exact thing. Like, well, the dog trainer can only look at what shows up on the day. They've got an hour to look at the dog on the day. And that hour can either go really well for you or it can fall apart. So, but it doesn't matter what you say in an email or say in a dog trainer, like we have to see it, that this is the only hands and eyes physically on the dog part of our whole course. Like if we were running the courses face-to-face and we'd known the dogs for months and the handlers for months, and they rocked up on one day and they were a bit funny, that'd be a different story. but this is like the only time that we see them. So we organized to do the temperament assessment again, and we did it in their workplace. And the dog was like, awesome. And the trainer was like, yeah, sweet. Like the dog was like, great. We've done that a couple of times. Caitlin did an assessment with someone, and it was out on the water down at Redcliffe, and this dog just went stupid about birds. And I don't know, I was like, it's just was so heightened and was acting like an idiot. So they bombed it big time. Yeah. And then then what happens is the handler, I can't remember specifically for this person and this dog, but what can often happen is something happens with the dog, and then the handler just panics and just falls apart. And then the dog's not supported. So then it just further, spirals out of control. But that's dogs, man. But anyway, same thing, went and did the assessment at the workplace. Sweet. So, but we'd make notes of those things and go, so this dog's been assessed at the workplace. So we've approved it at the workplace. Like that specific dog, I think from memory, had on its thing that it can't do walking. It can't do anything outdoors until she's had it around birds. And it hasn't acted like an idiot. It's better. They've done it. I think they recently did a reassessment, and it's better, which is great. But it doesn't need to be perfect. Who cares? Like, yeah, so the dog's super excited by birds, whatever. We don't have any birds inside. Fine. Doesn't matter. Just don't work with clients outside. That would be different if it was a school dog. If it was a school dog, you'd be in trouble. So then we would have to assess that situation differently and go, no, you're not ready. We also had another person that who we did assess, and I did go back and say not ready. And I believe we assessed them, this is a while ago. We went back and said not ready. Handler and dog combined wasn't ready. And they didn't like that, and went somewhere else, and another person told them they were ready, and the dog has bitten 2 times.
That's really sad.
So weren't ready, were not ready. You know what I'm saying? So one of the things to really take home is that we are doing our absolute best to keep you and your dog and your clients safe. Why would I care otherwise? Why would I care? If we didn't have actual risk, if we didn't have actual reasons, actual safety concerns and actual welfare concerns for the animal, why would we fail teams? Like, for fun? Like, anyone that's trained with us knows that our obedience assessment is marked on a scale of 0 to 5, and you can get zeros for things. Like, it doesn't, like, we're like, whatever, the dog can't do a drop to save its life. But you got to get your scores up in the other things. So it can't just be that it's a dog that you haven't put any work into, and this dog's just a menace, and because if you can't get a dog to do basic stuff like that to at least some level, then they shouldn't be in a workplace.
No,
anyway.
You won't have any control of the situation.
Yeah, like all they're going to do is disrupt a workplace and disrupt you and cause chaos. So, but we've got a scale of things. So we've never asked for dogs and handlers to be perfect. Like, we've never asked for that, but we want you to be safe. And we do know that sometimes people need a little bit more guidance around how to be safe. We've had other dogs before that we've not passed, whether it was their obedience or their temperament. And people just still take them to wherever they're going, schools, workplaces, things like that. And we will have done, not even one temperament assessment, multiple temperament assessments, and had trainers giving feedback like, this this dog is not okay in this environment. Like, this is not going to end well for the dog or for the people in the environment. So, but people still take them. People just, I don't know what it is about that. I guess there's probably a emotional aspect to it. Maybe there's some kind of maybe belief that we're, I don't know, just trying to annoy people by not passing their dogs on everything straight away. I don't know what it is. But yes, it does happen.
There's a lot of parties to protect, though, which is why, you need to have in writing that everything went well and, the dog passed and the handler passed for the very reason that that's the only piece of information that you can show if something does go wrong.
When you speak to someone whose dog has bitten, you don't want to be that person. Like, you don't want to be that person.
No, that'd be devastating.
Devastating. It is absolutely devastating. And it's devastating to all of the people who know the dog, which, if you've been exposing them to the community, that can sometimes be a lot of people. And it's heartbreaking. And, situations take place and things occur and none of us are perfect. And things happen. But I guess we're trying to set people up for the most amount of success possible. We can't control everything. We can't control, especially if you work with kids, we can't control kids. We can't control dogs within an inch of their life. Like, things happen. So, we get that. We understand that. But we want to set you up with the best possible chance of keeping everybody safe, because it is horrible when things don't go well. Fortunately, the dog that I'm talking about is fine. Like, someone wasn't seriously injured. So the dog's fine. The person's, quote unquote, okay. I don't actually know the full details, but they weren't badly injured.
Yeah.
They're okay. But it's a big deal. So, it's pretty, it's pretty stressful and it's scary and things like that. So I suppose, like, the amount of stress and disappointment that is involved in getting a not yet competent on your temperament assessment, from my experience, doesn't compare to the stress and disappointment of your dog biting someone. Because that sucks for everyone.
But I think the main thing to take away is that we want our teams to succeed, and we're not doing anything to jeopardize that unless we think that there needs some more work to be done.
Marleen made a really great point about the dog being not ready. So Miku, just, Marleen, knowing that you guys listening, like, if you haven't done a temperament assessment before, or if you haven't, this is your first dog or whatever, you might not know that. Like, how would you know that the dog's not ready if you haven't worked in animal assisted therapy before? You might get that wrong. You might think the dog is ready. Marleen already works with Kuma, so she knows, like, okay, this is like fun and great, but it's also hard. So it's not just a walk in the park. It makes things more difficult and it is more stressful. So, Marleen was able to pick that up for Miku, and even got, as far along as like, I'm pretty sure she's ready. Sweet, let's go. And then like, okay, well, that one environment is probably not. And I guess even like taking that environment out of the equation, Marleen, would you say like your dog's overall confidence level at the time of the first assessment versus your dog's overall confidence level at the time of the second assessment, regardless of environment, so take away the environment as a factor?
It's definitely increased. Having that cue and her being that's definitely increased her confidence, because it's now set the expectations for her a lot clearer as well, rather than anything.
So if you hadn't had that experience with your first temperament assessment, you maybe wouldn't have seen that gap for her and been so focused on that gap, because overall Miku's going to have a way better life being an overall more confident dog.
Yep.
So I think that's like a great outcome, but it's easy for us to look at a situation in hindsight and go, oh, look at all these like silver linings. Like, it's so wholesome. Like,
but I think it's also really important to learn from the situations as well, and go, yep, that definitely wasn't, like I said, I didn't set her up for success. But yeah, she's a good dog now. So we were meant to have our first session, but the client didn't turn up, which was a bit sad. But you know what we did? We went into the room and we learned to chill out a little bit, because that's one of the things that she's not always her strength. So we chilled out for a bit, and I was super impressed with that. So we did a little bit of training. So
go Miku.
Amazing. Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, that talking about it with someone who's been through it might be super helpful for people who are either coming up to a temperament assessment or have already had one, not yet competent. There is a caveat to this. So like, we do sometimes come across dogs that we think are too far gone. That does happen. So that's just a part of life. We will generally let you know that when we know it, but it can be hard for us to know that. So it's never going to be a case of we're just trying to milk as many temperament assessments out of you as what we can get. It'll be that we're trying to encourage and support teams to get the dogs to, because this is what can happen. Like with Marleen's dog, with Miku, all she needed was some help. And we've seen lots of teams come back and reassess and get it right. And the dogs have improved heaps. It's not just luck or the environment or they woke up on the right side of the bed that day. We've seen the dogs improve. We've seen the handlers improve, and the trainers have been very impressed with them. We've been very impressed with them. Sometimes the dogs we just don't get there, you know, and that's obviously hard to hear and understand too, but please understand that's a very difficult call for us to make after meeting your dog for only 1 or 2 hours. So that's where the water gets a little bit more murky, and we don't really know. Like we would need to spend quite a lot of time with the dog, unless it's something sometimes it's very obvious and we're like, no, like this is no. But sometimes it's not. So yeah, but I just want to help people understand, like, the lines of communication are open. So please speak with us, speak with your trainers, and yeah, don't be scared to reach out and have a chat, because it happens, you know, I'm not going to say all the time, but it happens a fair bit. So hang in there. And well done to you, Marleen and Miku. Very proud of you.
Thank you. I'm pretty proud.
Thanks for talking to us today. You're a legend.
Marleen.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you're interested in studying with Therapy Dogs Australia, or you have a few more questions before deciding, please get in touch with us by emailing courses@therapydog.com.au or visiting our website at www.therapydog.com.au for more information and FAQs.